The Ko language is the world's most phonetically diverse language. It has the largest recorded phonetic inventory of at least 58 consonants, 31 vowels, and 4 tones, according to this guy, or at least 87 consonants, 20 vowels, and 2 tones, according to this other guy. It's divided into the East Ko and the West Ko dialects. And if you take a look at its phonetic inventory, we have, of course, our usual bilabial plosives, alveolar fricatives, and glottal stops. But then what are these? What the heck is this symbol? Well, today, we'll discuss some of the more special features and sounds included within the IPA, and make sure that the information not only clicks, but also that we eject all the confusion that may have so your brain won't implode. Let's get started. If you take a look at the main consonant section, you notice that it's labeled with this word pulmonic, which essentially means that the airflow originates from the lungs and the diaphragm. But not all sounds result from air from the lungs. This brings in an important concept in phonetics. How exactly is the airflow produced? This airstream mechanism is categorized by 1, the organ which initiates the airflow, called the initiator, and 2, the direction of the airflow. So of course we have airflow produced by the diaphragm and lungs, called a pulmonic mechanism, but you can also have airflow produced by the glottis, not to be confused with voicing, called a glottalic mechanism, as well as airflow produced by the tongue itself, called a lingual mechanism. As for the direction of airflow, you can have sounds with outwards airflow that pushes air out, called egressive, as well as sounds with inwards airflow that kind of squeezes air in, called ingressive. For most of the consonants that we're familiar with, since they rely on pushing air produced by the lungs outwards, we can say that these sounds have a pulmonic egressive mechanism. But that brings up an interesting question. Exactly what types of sounds do all of these other airstream mechanisms produce? So first on our list of special IPA sounds are clicks. Out of curiosity, as an English speaker, what is your go-to expression of disapproval? For many people, we often use the interjection to signify our contempt or irritation at something. Daniel, did you fail your physics test? Have you been slacking off in class? Well, turns out there's actually a special section for these sounds, and it's called a click. In order to generally conceptualize what exactly a click is, think of any motion that involves a sudden release of pressure. For example, think of it as snapping your fingers, popping open the cork of a liquor bottle, or even a mousetrap. In essence, 2 parts of your mouth is first stuck together tightly, then by suction there's a sudden release of pressure, which we call clicks. In technical terminology, clicks are produced with a lingual ingressive airstream mechanism, which means that the tongue is pulled back to create airflow. So we have a couple types of clicks. First we have the bilabial click. These are kind of like your stereotypical kissing sound, but rather with lips unrounded as a default, kind of like instead. Then there's the dental click, which is basically the sound I talked about earlier, which can be produced by sucking your tongue to the top row of your teeth, kind of like this. You also have the click that sounds like a clucking sound, the postalveolar click produced by squeezing your tongue to the top row of your mouth, your alveola, then rapidly pulling downwards, resulting in that's a pretty fun sound to make. But if you pull your tongue backwards instead of downwards in that position, what you end up getting is a palatal click, which sounds like kind of like you're knocking on a door. And lastly, the last major click in the IPA is the lateral click, pronounced like kind of like sucking your tongue on the sides of your teeth instead of the front of the teeth like the dental click. And as it turns out, quite a few languages actually use these sounds. In South Africa, languages like Xhosa and Zulu have at least and in their languages, represented by C, Q, and X, which is pretty obvious as one of the clicks is literally in one of the language's names. Next we have implosive sounds, which are produced with a glottalic ingressive mechanism, which means that we have to suck the air inwards a bit at the beginning to articulate these sounds. This includes the bilabial implosive, blah, the alveolar implosive, blah, and then we also have the palatal, velar, and uvular implosives, pronounced respectively like y, l, and blah. You'll notice that if you feel your throat a bit when trying to pronounce these sounds, your glottis kind of tenses up before the sound is actually articulated, which is why it's a glottalic ingressive mechanism. These sounds are found in quite a bit of languages, including but not limited to Vietnamese, North American Maya languages, and even some dialects of Chinese, such as Hainanese. But moving on, ejectives are the exact opposite of implosives, having a glottalic egressive mechanism. You might be wondering, why then aren't these sounds called explosives instead? Well, they kind of are like mini explosions in your mouth, because ejectives are formed by holding a consonant position, building up air behind that position, and then abruptly releasing everything, causing a pretty loud rendition of the sound. For example, you can take the letter T, the voiceless alveolar stop. Now, to produce the ejective version of it, all you have to do is hold your tongue in the T position, and then hold your breath, and then suddenly releasing it, resulting in a dramatic burst of air, like You can do this with other consonants as well, such as or even Again, if you feel your throat while producing an ejective, it kind of tenses up your glottis as the air compresses behind the restriction of airflow. Ejectives are found in 16% of the world's languages, such as the East African language Amharic spoken in Ethiopia, to contrast with implosives, which are only found in 13% of the world's languages. Lastly, after scrolling through the IPA for a bit, you'll notice that it actually includes this additional section titled Other Symbols. It lists a whole bunch of random, uncategorized symbols. Oftentimes languages, through historical sound change, can end up with sounds that might not fit into one category, or can even have multiple categories. For example, the W sound found in many languages is actually both a labial and velar approximant. So the people who came up with the IPA decided to label it as labial-velar approximant. Same thing with the H sound, the labial-velar fricative, found in some dialects of English where they pronounce where as where. But if that's the case, why aren't there other random sounds just randomly added to the IPA, such as alveolar-uvular approximant, or even dental-velar fricative? Well, these other sounds, I suspect, were actually added in because they were considered part of some of the more major and prominent languages that linguistics felt were important to add in. For instance, in Mandarin, the ji, qi, xi sounds are pretty palatalized sounds, but it wouldn't be accurate to just call them palatal fricatives. Instead, linguists chose to categorize them as alveolo-palatal, midway between the alveola and the hard palate, resulting in a rougher equivalent to a hissing sound, kind of like ji, qi, xi instead of ji, qi, xi. Some other notable sounds include the lateral flap, found in some dialects of Korean and Japanese, the labial-palatal proximant, kind of like a simultaneous y and w, the r sound, found in some dialects of Chinese, epiglottal sounds found in some Semitic languages, as well as the Swedish SJ sound, the sound, which is interestingly referred to as a simultaneous sh and denoting a much bigger range of the palate that the air is scraping against, kind of like the hissing of a cat, like Fun fact for that one. It was actually added in 1948 simply because some linguists couldn't find a better way to categorize the sound and just got lazy making its description. The SJ sound is literally found in only one language to date, and that's Swedish. Remember, for many of these quote-unquote other sounds, they were only added because some linguists deemed it important enough to be made an exception. And while this could have some serious and potentially biased implications about some languages being more worthy of being studied than other languages, it's fair to note that most sounds only have these unique symbols in the IPA because they've actually been encountered in real human language, not just theoretically possible sounds, which is why you see these blank but not grayed out spaces representing sounds that are linguistically possible but not present in any human language. Finally, we can talk about these additional markers to modify or specify more details about certain sounds. First is the tie bar, which can join two consonants together to create affricates to represent one phoneme, like t, ch, ch, or z, j, j, or two vowels together to create a diphthong, such as how monophthongs a and I combine to become the diphthong I. Then we have aspiration, represented by this mini superscript letter H, which can be attached to consonants to denote breathing out when pronouncing it. This trait can be seen in many languages, including English, where we tend to aspirate our voiceless vowels and unaspirate our voiced vowels. For example, we say tap instead of dap, which can be perceived by many native English speakers as dap with a D in front of it. There's also labialization to change consonants like k to qu, such as the English word quick. Palatalization in languages like Russian to change hard consonants to soft consonants like p and py, and velarization for dialects of Chinese, such as the word for special, t, where you can really hear the velar scraping. So I was rewatching a previous video I made about IPA vowels, and it turns out I misspelled one word. It's pretty frustrating, and to that I say, but yeah, that's the special sounds and features of the IPA. As per any lesson on any subject, it's always good to get some practice and improve and get proficient on the topic. So here's a list of clicks, implosives, ejectives, and other sounds for you to attempt to pronounce. Good luck!